Welcome to Entwined, the Constellation Chronicles, the podcast where we dive deep into the intricate web of family constellations and the profound stories that shape our lives. I'm your host, Alexis Gonzalez. I'm an author, speaker, and family constellations facilitator. In each episode, we'll be speaking with facilitators and thought leaders who explore the dynamic relationships that connect us all. Together, we'll uncover the hidden patterns, transformative experiences, and rich insights that family constellations reveals. Thank you for joining us on this journey as we explore the entwined stories of our past, the present moments we share, and the futures we're creating together. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about family constellations, then you'll love my free ebook, Interwoven Paths. You can find this ebook on my website at www.vibratecreate.com, or you can also visit the link in the description below. In today's episode, we'll be speaking with Gary Stuart. Gary is a 5 times best-selling author of books like Ancestral Intelligence, Venus Envy, and Quantum Activation. He's a master constellation facilitator and speaker who has been facilitating transformative healing experiences for over 2 decades. He learned this work directly from Bert Hellinger himself, who is the founder of this work. He's worked with thousands of clients from all over the world, one of them being my teacher, Sonia Arias.
Immediately, I said, I get that. What is this constellation stuff?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into Entwined, the Constellation Chronicles. And my name is Alexis Gonzalez, and today I have a very special guest, and his name is Gary Stuart. He was actually one of my teachers. My teacher is Sonia Arias, and she learned with Gary Stuart. And she told me about workshops that she's been to about him, and I'd love to get into some of those stories later. So Gary Stuart is a 5 times international best-selling author, and he's a family constellation facilitator. He teaches in Arizona, in Prescott, Sedona, and also online. And thank you so much for joining me today, Gary.
Yes, I'm thrilled to speak about this work. The world needs it right now.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm so excited to begin this for that reason. And also for facilitators. I think that's one of my main goals as well, is to help myself and also for other facilitators to develop. And the best way is to see many facilitators. So
absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in here. Yeah. All right. So first off, I wanted to start off. I know you've shared in other interviews about your origins, where you come from, but I'd like for you to share here as well. So
sure. Wonderful. Well, I never thought I'd be on this path. As you get older, you realize you don't think you're on a certain path, but you're actually on a path and you don't see that you're on it. So that's kind of the paradox of getting older. You realize all along, why didn't I see it while it was happening? And now I'm here, and all those things led to it. So I grew up very poor in central Massachusetts, a town called Sterling. A lot of people might have heard of it from a nursery rhyme, which is actually true. Mary Had a Little Lamb. That happened in Sterling, Massachusetts with Mary Sawyer. She became the cat lady of the town and had all the stray cats come to her house. And we would sing the song on the school bus, and she'd rail her umbrella at us. I never want to do that again. So it was just interesting. Now it's a wealthy bedroom community of Worcester, Massachusetts, and Boston. So my friends and neighbors can't afford to live there when they grew up because it became so wealthy. But in my generation, and I would talk about generational wealth or poverty, like, even though we owned X amount of land, we had no mortgage on the house. By today's standards, that's wealth. But back in the 50s and 60s, that was considered dirt poor. So it's interesting now you could live in the same property and have a $2 million mortgage and not really own it. The bank owns it. You're considered wealthy living in that town, but you're actually poor because the bank owns everything. So we had all that and didn't understand the value of it way back then. And if we held on to the property, we would have been multimillionaires many times over with the same property that we were allegedly poverty stricken on. So it's interesting how inflation and time and economics change the landscape internally and externally, what you believe your roots are and where you came from and how you struggle to survive.
Yeah. So So from that point though, how did you get led into family constellations?
Well, a lot of things happen in between there. We'll give you the faster story here. I always wanted to know, why am I here? What am I supposed to do this lifetime? I didn't really get it. I was very depressed when I turned 30. And I said, why am I here? My life is half over. Say I live till 65. I'm 73 now. So I
No
skipped.
way, I did not know that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so good.
And well, Constellations is the fountain of youth. We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, I have different energy than most people, but yeah. And well, I finally, back in the 80s, I discovered stand-up comedy, and I was terrified to be on stage, but I didn't know I was getting a PhD in public speaking, handling that fear, being in the public eye, creating jokes that were funny or not funny. But I always chose not stupid humor about cotton balls, or no disrespect to like who Jerry Seinfeld or some of the idiotic things they became multimillionaires over. I tried to push social consciousness and create meaning and talk about politics. And there were jokes about celebrities and all that, kind of Joan Rivers style, poking fun. You could call it iconoclast, poking fun at, movie stars, politicians, whatever, and about all the hypocrisy from the Pope to the president to Prince Charles before he was king. So it was all fun stuff, and I did good, but they fixed a couple events where I was supposed to have a good spot to make sure I wouldn't win because I was one of the funnier originators. So after all that, I decided to leave Boston, move to Los Angeles, not knowing that no one cared if you didn't have a TV credit, like an HBO or this or that. So I was, plugging around the stages. I would see my jokes on Jay Leno or Conan, because the writers would go to the comedy shows, take our material we were all working on, run home and send it to Conan or Jay Leno. And then on Monday night, I would hear some of my premises and jokes on national TV.
Oh my gosh.
It's a
How
vicious
funny.
business. So I'm not good enough to be on TV, but the writers can go and get a shortcut. So, and I can see from their point of view, they're writers that pay to do a show. Let me see what people are talking about in the comedy world. Oh, this guy talked about that. That guy talked about this. And then a friend of mine in Boston, we did public access shows, and I did kind of a drag funny thing about Julia Child. Then I'm watching Mad TV when I moved to Los Angeles, and there was my Julia Child thing being done by another comic on a TV show. So that guy who was in our cable show moved to Los Angeles, stole my material and routines, sold them as though he thought them up, and yet no one wanted to pay me for my, my creativity. Let's put it that way.
Mm.
So all that aside, I ended up, after about 11 or 12 years, I said, I was in my early 40s. I said, this just isn't working. I'm tired of, 3 nights a week going on stages, all the politics and lack of getting discovered, and I'm always committed to the Yankee spirit is suffer till the end, and I just said, you know what? I think I'll get into the healing arts, massage, because I was working as a waiter and slash comic, as you do in Los Angeles. And then I became a massage therapist. And as soon as I got into one of the top spas, and it was only 150-hour training. Now the training is about 1,000 hours for massage therapists. And what I noticed when I was touching people, I was getting guidance, talk to them about anger. There's guilt in their neck. Their neck issue is about guilt. I would get this headline, guilt, guilt, guilt. So I'd say, okay, I'm being guided. I didn't tell him I was being guided. I said, so is everything you're feeling guilty about when I was massaging them? Oh my God, you have no idea, blah, blah, blah. So I realized something bigger I was tuning into when I touched their bodies was guiding me to heal them. And they'd all walk out, oh, I feel like 1,000 pounds is lifted off me. And I get $100 tips. And I became the top therapist within weeks. And these other people there were seasoned with years of experience. So I was tapped into something. Now I know in hindsight, that's the same constellation field like Bert Hellinger tapped into with your family system. So I already was in tune to hidden dimensions and unseen dimensions that really showed itself in massage. And how I discovered Constellations, Margot Riddler, who lives in upstate New York, I believe now, she was in Los Angeles trying to start her practice. And she had an ad. There was a whole person alternative health guy, which is out of business now. It might be online, I'm not sure. But the ad was, what if the pain you're carrying isn't yours? And I went, bingo. I got to find out, Margot, what is this? I totally get it. We got to meet. We got to meet. What is this about? I never heard of it, blah, blah, blah. And we met. She had no clients. So we did one-on-one sessions, which were absolutely amazing. Then I went to a few workshops. She had like living room workshops in a well-to-do area called Brentwood or Santa Monica in meditation centers. And I went to every workshop I could find and bought Bert Hellinger books and was just devouring it. I knew instantly this was my career for my life. This is why I was here, to do this and to support people and to learn it. I'm a voracious reader and I read everything. And then by luck, Bert Hellinger came to Santa Barbara. And I went to all this. He came there about at least twice. I went to both workshops. Then he did one in Washington, D.C. So I flew to Washington, D.C., and he did a workshop there. And we just became really buddies on top of all that, which I didn't expect. And I think little things happen. He was divorcing his wife, and I knew the producers of all the events because I was the registrar and volunteer to support Bert. They needed staff, and I was more than happy to support Bert being in America. And he wanted to talk to Europe. So I said, well, I have an international phone card. Let me take Bert to the phone booth back when we had phone booths, pre-cellular. And I dialed all my codes in Bert's number and he got to talk. And I think he just felt so supported by me, would walk back and forth. And then I went to Europe and trained with him in Austria. It turned out to be a 6-week program. We thought it was a 1 week, and it was a full year program of being in Austria 6 weeks with him from 8 in the morning till 11 at night, 7 days a week. And he never tired. He was in his 80s then. He wasn't, and this before he died, obviously. But it was just absolutely most amazing experience of my life. And we just formed a friendship, mentorship, you name it. We just became very close, and it really helped me. A lot of new facilitators, which I worry about the next generation, because I feel like I'm first generation, or you could call it, I guess, second generation Bert Hellinger. He's the original on one of his students, so I'm first generation, is that they're not tuning into the field. I've even coached other facilitators, and they act as though they got to fix a problem, like it's a car mechanic. And I really worry about that approach. We're trying to help or support someone and look at the family system. And I don't mean to be superior, like better than everyone, but they're not tuning into the field, which is much more nebulous and mysterious. Bert wasn't afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it. And I've even asked these facilitators, Bert taught us one thing, which I'll share with our listeners who are interested in constellations. He said, you become the newest member of the family system. You get to look at all the adults, all the ancestors, all the siblings of the client in a more objective way because you're the youngest member as a facilitator. So that's why the clients always would sit on your right side and you sit on the left side like you're the little brother or sister who's the facilitator.
My teacher taught me this, but the way she described was because the client always comes first.
Yeah, the same thing. And that's true. Yeah. That's universal. That's absolute truth. Yeah. Otherwise, we're sitting in this space like, I'm the leader of this family system now. I'll fix all the rights and wrongs and trauma. That's so arrogant. You have to be humble and feel that the ancestors will show you a gift. So I feel the ancestral field trusts me from the get-go, and they reveal secrets to me so fast that I pick up on that are unseen by everyone in the room, and even fellow facilitators. And a couple of people said, wow, you got the Hellinger transmission, and it's the highest compliment I could get. And Bert gave me the highest compliment I ever got. He sent me an email. He asked me to write a paragraph for a new book, The Laws of Healing. And his wife erased my name and put her name on the why, I'll never know. This is right before he died, right?
Yeah,
And
I read parts of that book. I know which one.
yeah,
It's the one
yeah.
that has
So
like rainbows on it.
I did that beginning paragraph is from me.
Oh wow.
Anyway, and it was just interesting that that happened. But he sent me an email after I wrote, and he said, "You understand my work better than me." And it was such a sweet, he just sent a note, "You understand my work better than me." And it was just such a lovely. And then we did, I think for his 95th birthday, we did a tribute book, and they picked mine to be the first because it touches me still. They said, "You made all of us cry when we read it." I said he was a modern day Columbus who wasn't the earth. Everyone believed the earth was flat. He's saying the earth is multidimensional. There's much more unseen than there is seen. And he had the courage to go there, you know?
Yes. Sonia has told me stories about him. I think she's only seen him facilitate once. And she said that at times someone could just come sit down, and because he was so present and in the moment, they would just process there without any words,
Oh, yeah, I know.
nothing. And they just sit there, and then he says, "Okay, are you done?" And they're like, "Yeah, I'm finished." And then they go.
Yeah,
She said
yeah,
it was
yeah.
so beautiful to see.
Sometimes it was like that. And some people who were resistant, I mean, he would shock them and he would teach us why he did this in our training. He said, "I can't work with you. You're not open. Go sit down." People would be in absolute shock. Bert Hellinger refused to work with. So then it touches me because I miss him. And he died 5 years ago, September, just last month, September 19th, I believe. And he'd tell us, the group, "So you know why I did that?" He said, "Because they weren't open to receive what I wanted to give them. And I shocked them so they'd be open, they'd be undefended when they thought Bert Hellinger, I'm too screwed up for Bert to work with me." And then it'd have them sit back down. "Okay, now you're open. Okay, what do you think your problem is?" And then he would go to a place, no one. And my only two things against Bert is that being a German authoritarian, and it's not a harsh criticism. When I was repping for him in our training, he said, "How do you feel?" I said, "I have so much information about fear here and why I'm terrified." "No, you feel this way." And he wouldn't let me talk. Like if a rep talks, it's going to destroy the field. My view and the American view that we got together as a group, not just Americans, New Zealand, Canada, we had this little niche group. And we said, he's missing a lot by not even listening to what the rep has to say. So we agreed that the reps are valuable and what they have to say will guide you as a facilitator. We don't want them going on repeating the Encyclopedia Britannica of what they feel. What is the short, simple statement of how you feel? Then I would get a healing insight. Try saying this instead. What happens if you're, "Oh, I got a shiver all over." So they're defended or whatever it is they're expressing. Now, don't forget, even though they might be a rep for you, that's actually the great grandmother speaking through them or the great grandfather speaking through them as though it's their experience. So, in a way, the reps are speaking for the ancestor, but they're not conscious. They're expressing the voice of the ancestor who doesn't have a body to talk, but they have the experience. So once we can verbalize the trauma, you'll feel a shock wave go through the room when we get to the truth. So I was in Costa Rica. I've done workshops all over the world, actually internationally too. And rep was sitting there and he just yanked his neck when the father rep was put in, but it was like, "I'm going to pull away from my father." And so I said to him, just, he's sitting there as the rep and he barely spoke English. The Costa Rican and my Spanish is limited. And I said, "So what is that fear and pulling away?" "No, I wasn't." I said, "Oh, okay. It looked like you were." I said, "Let's just wait a second. Now how you feel?" "Oh, I'm terrified of him." You know what I mean? Like I could process it quicker than they could because I've seen it thousands of times, but I let the rep wait. They call it waiting a couple beats just to let it sink in. And I'm not saying I have the absolute truth, but generally the field doesn't lie. The field of consciousness doesn't lie. And the dead would not show up to play games. If their great grandson or great great granddaughter is there to work healing their part of the family system, they will show up like angels with wings to support them with unconditional love and especially me not judging them as bad people, and I've had every conceivable, let's see, trauma that anyone could have: satanic worshiping cult clients, murders, rapes, you name it, I've encountered it. So how much can we be neutral without judgment and expand our hearts as big as this rock here? You know what I mean?
That brings
With
up a
judgment.
question for me
Yeah.
because well, obviously because of my age, you can see I'm much newer to being a
Yeah,
facilitator.
no worries. You're the new generation.
Yeah. So I want to take in as much as I can for myself as well here. So the question that brought up for me was at the beginning of your journey, um, did you notice it was harder for you to be as neutral, and how did you develop as you grew to be able to hold space for much bigger things?
Yeah, I think Bert modeled it for us. And now where I had the massage thing happening, and I knew I couldn't be a massage therapist forever. It wears out your body, so I was already worn out from stand-up comedy. I said, I need a new career. I was in massage probably a decade, so it was probably year 9. I said, I can't do this. I don't want to do this when I'm 60, 70 years old. I won't have any arms or legs left because you're always on your knees carrying tables out, when you don't realize the future injuries like my knee issues or shoulder issues, which I still have with older age, but it comes from repetitive stress, say from the massage. So when I found Constellations, I can sit and do a group and tune into the same field that's open during the massage. Basically, where I was touching their body, I was massaging their back, so to speak. I was actually in their ancestral field while I was giving them the massage. And the ancestors were actually giving me the insights to speak to them about to bring out healing and clarity. And then when I got into Constellation, I said, oh, it's all right. It was here all along. I just didn't see that it was my new career. And I just grabbed the brass ring and ran with it, And I think because I was unafraid of the unknown, because I'd ever since I was a kid, I was reading books on near-death experiences and psychic phenomena way back in the 60s. ESP, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called,
Oh my goodness. So I've been doing this for,
yeah,
well, Constellations, I've been in for around 3-ish years.
yeah,
It was at the end of my journey of like seeking in the spiritual realm. So it's been about 10 years. I started when I
great,
was 19.
great.
And I was totally into all that. Do you know Jane Roberts?
Oh, I'm a huge Seth fan. Huge. Well, Seth in the 80s, what was I doing in the 80s? Yeah, that's when I was still, yeah, actually, I was a waiter in Boston before I became a waiter slash stand-up comic. I would be reading, I read all of the Seth material, and I'm still a huge fan. And he really expanded my thing. And if you really look at some of the expansive levels of consciousness of the Seth material, it's equal to what Hellinger was doing in the multidimensional realm, because Jane Roberts was giving it language through Seth about the different dimensions, reincarnational things, different stories about historical stuff like Jesus being a combination of characters. I really view that not to step on anyone's religious toes, but how do we know certain aspects of the Bible aren't a Superman comic book that they embellished to give this magical powers to the alleged savior? So, and I wrote a book on it actually called Venus Envy, because it ties into constellations, because if you look that I've probably done at least 18,000 constellations since 1998. About 14,000, maybe 15,000 were sexually abused women. So you can say it's really universal, incest and sexual abuse in family systems. I've also had a handful of men, not as many men, with hidden gay uncles, or, angry gay fathers who would sodomize their son to teach him a lesson. I mean, you name the ugliness of humanity, I've seen it. And what I want your listeners to know, to be neutral with that, is to really understand this concept I'm going to share right now. No one asked for what life gave them. And if that person ended up a sexual perpetrator, then his father or grandfather was a sexual perpetrator. So most perpetrators are victims first. And they're trying to get back their power by repeating the trauma that was done to them to kind of get it back. they'll never get it back because it's almost like they lost their innocence. And that's one word that Bert, it's actually, don't discount the word innocence this day and age, because we're born innocent. And Bert had a courageous statement to say, we're born guilty. So how we meant that, the context for that is that we received this body in this life, such great things were given to us as a gift, that we feel guilty that we have to pay back the family system. I wouldn't be here without you. What can I do for you? What, Dad? What can I do for you, Mom? And here's where people went off the rails with Bert. He said incest is actually the child sacrificing itself to the mother or father or both to save the family system from dissolving. It sacrifices its body to its creators. People hated Bert because society, psychology wants to demonize men are bad, men are bad, men are perverts, blah, blah, blah. And I got into trouble. I had a sex therapist, one of my constellations where there was severe incest and autism in the family. Autism, well, I can tell you that it's really a dark story. If you want to hear it, I'll tell you. It's quite interesting. So I guess the sex therapist was one of the top sex therapists in the country. She actually flies to every judge at every courthouse, New York, Chicago, to give the sentencing guidelines to the judges according to the sexual crime against the child. 10 years in jail, 15 years in jail, solitary confinement, life without parole, whatever, So she was there and she was a huge fan of mine. And okay, just to show you the magic of constellations, this is the second client she gave me. So the first client she brought in was an autistic boy, 22 years old, who had never spoken his whole life, who was sodomized by his grandfather. And that night, so here's how the field guided me. It's a very powerful story. It touches me still. It's one of the greatest achievements of my life. So he barely understood. He couldn't communicate. Blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, in the constellation, we're going to put your chair backwards in the room. The room is a semicircle. Think of two words. If you understand these words, I'm innocent. All I want you to say is I'm innocent. Think, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent. So I set up his grandfather, who sat on the floor. He said, my butt hurts. A rep for the grandfather. No one knew. I do the work blindly. No one knew anything about this kid. All I knew is his grandfather sodomized him, and he's never spoken a word since he was 4 years old. That's all I knew. And she was a real progressive, said, well, I heard about this stuff, and you're the local guy. I said, let's see what happens. And we had compassion for the grandfather, who probably was sodomized at 4 years old by the great-grandfather. So the rep is sitting there and we're doing it all. And then I took him out of the chair. I had him stand. We did a closing circle. And I forget what the closing words. It probably was something to, I'm innocent and thank you all for supporting me, blah, blah, blah. So the counselor calls me up crying the next morning. He's speaking in full sentences. He knew how to speak all along. We lifted the trauma he didn't know he was carrying and had to shut up about out of his body. And she said, I've been a psychotherapist for a PhD for 40 years. I've never seen such a miraculous healing like that, of an instant transformation in less than 24 hours of someone who didn't speak for 18 years of their life, like an overnight. Just, it's my proudest achievement. It just was unbelievable.
Yeah,
So then she
Um,
brought, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, you started this off by saying you got in trouble in some way. This is connected.
Yeah, this is the next one. So she brought another client in the following week. Well, here's a 30-year-old boy, severely autistic, who's not speaking. And we want to see if the same miraculous results can happen a second time. I said, we'll do our best. He was such a sweet guy. I mean, he was really like a 5-year-old child, even though he was like probably about 32, and he could mumble. So I talked to his mother and I said, so when did he stop speaking? She said, well, his father was a celebrity radio person out in Los Angeles in the 70s when he was born. And when he was 3 years old, he had all his Hollywood radio announcer friends orally copulate with him and destroyed his vocal cords with penises. A gangbang of a 3-year-old by famous men, destroying, a baby's mouth compared to an adult man's equipment. They destroyed his throat, basically. And that's why he doesn't speak, separate from the autism. Now, I don't know if he was vaccinated or where the autism or the trauma of it all came from, So we did the constellation, and I alluded, the therapist was there, thank God. I wasn't guilting or shaming anyone. I said, there's a reason. My thought was, how can any mother not see when she saw her 3-year-old traumatized, not ask the father what the hell happened when you were babysitting him? I couldn't understand that. What mother would ignore that? And how could anyone ignore that when your baby, infant, not baby, infant, is that traumatized? And we set up the system, and I set up her ancestry behind her rep, mind you, she was watching. And I said, well, there's probably a reason you turned a blind eye, because severe sexual abuse is in your family system. So, of course, she went to the therapist. Luckily, the therapist was in the room. She would have sued me. How can he denigrate my family? My husband was the perpetrator here. He's trying to insinuate that I had something to do with it, blah, blah, blah. Well, and all I alluded to is I said, you might not have seen it because it's a pattern in your family system to either pick a perpetrator or you had sexual abuse in your family system that's unseen. I'm just saying it's in your background as well. It's not just purely accidental. The therapist called me in the morning. She said, thank God I was there. I had to talk her down off the ledge. She was so angry with you, blah, blah. How dare you insinuate? I said, I stand by it. I stand by it. And at the end of the night, the autistic boy, he went and hugged and kissed every person in the room on the cheek. He felt so much love. And he was just like, and it was so sweet. It was like a baby saying, oh, thank you for liberating me. Thank you for liberating. Thank you for seeing. It was so deeply moving, just incredible. But she read the therapist, the riot act. She said, well, Gary's not a psychotherapist. He's not licensed. He does a modality that's outside the boundaries of common psychotherapy. And she said, I was there. He didn't guilt, blame, or shame you for what was in your history of your family system. He was stating an ancestral fact that you don't like hearing, and that's all he did. He didn't denigrate you or anything. And she was in such denial. There's one trigger right there, that she wanted to remain innocent as the mother, which of course we do. No one likes to think they did anything bad, but you can create bad things through omission and denial that you don't want to see.
Well, yeah, right when you said that she was really angry, what I got was it's a coping mechanism from, like you said, seeing or actually acknowledging and looking at.
Right. And she's probably been hiding it her whole life, and she probably was victimized and has no idea that she picked a man who would be equal to the perpetrator in her family system. So
Yeah,
Bert,
yeah.
go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
Always says that we choose our partners based off of our family system. So there's never any accidents or like it's always perfect who we choose.
Yeah, perfect or imperfect. But the thing is also, there's a familiarity. So, sometimes women bond. I'm not demonizing women here at all, especially multi-generational sexual abuse, whatever. But it's going to sound crazy to the average listener who's not in the constellation field. But there's a comfort knowing you were victimized like your mother was victimized, like your grandmother. We're women in this family because all women are victimized, and we are loyal to the feminine victims who didn't get a chance to heal or express their pain over being abused. And it's not always the father. It can be an older brother. It could be the neighbor's son. It could be, I've seen every myriad of stuff, so it's not always like the father and daughter or whatever. It could be the neighbor. I had a man who was on a camping trip with his father's brother at 10 years old. He sodomized him in the tent on the overnight camping trip. So this client is heterosexual. And he had to sit at the dinner table every holiday since he was 10 years old with his father and brother at the head of the table, knowing he was anally raped and had to keep it secret because he loved his uncle. He said, the biggest tragedy is I loved my uncle, almost he felt like a brother to me, and I had to keep his secret away from my father because my father would have killed him, murdered him, if he knew that was done to me. So look at what that little boy had to carry. Now he's a grandfather. So luckily, it all worked out fine, but he's a grandfather now, and that was his experience. And it didn't stop him from procreating. And he has, of course, a grandson who's adorable. And it's interesting how life goes on in spite of any trauma. That's what's amazing to me about our species. I said in one of my final comments of one of my trainings, I said, how did we ever survive as a species with all this trauma that we've experienced and carried? And yet we still have sex. Sex makes people crazy. They do all kinds of stuff, but they keep reproducing generation after generation until they get it right. So in a way, sexuality is our savior. And of course, what's the first thing the Catholic Church demonizes? Sexuality. So it's all like interlocked.
So you just said something like about how hardships
Yes.
that define us or help us to grow, I guess.
Yeah.
And so that kind of brought me back to the point about you leading into family constellations, because
Yes.
I'm sure you had something specific that led you into wanting to learn this work that happened in your own personal life.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it happened years ago, way back in the 60s. Now, if I go back, those were the kind of adult career stuff. But if I go back into the emotional pain, I was a severely battered child for most of my childhood. And the day my father died of horrible cancer, everyone said, we're so sorry your father died. I said, this is the happiest day of my life. They said, why would you say such a thing on your father's death day? I said, I will never be beaten again this lifetime. I will never be bludgeoned ever again from July 16th, 1966 forward to the rest of my life. And there was, I'll tell you a little story about the male lineage too. And so I knew being a battered child. So fast forward, that I was about 14 or 15. Of course, the Beatles, LSD, psychedelics came in a few years later. I would have bad trip after bad trip after bad trip on LSD, all these scary fears and afraid I'd commit suicide while I was on LSD. And I knew I had a lot of bad feelings inside me. I didn't know it came from my ancestral lineage. I said, why do I have these bad trips? I kept taking LSD to say, well, there's got to be one good trip in here somewhere. And it really bothered me that I had so many negative things come up during a psychedelic experience, which was the rage. Beatles were doing it, Rolling Stones, everyone at that time. George Harrison was exploring. Timothy Leary, who got busted in University of California, who I met actually in LA, which I was thrilled. And so by the time I was about 23, now here, I was a factory worker and doing odd jobs, didn't know what I was going to do for a career. John Lennon was on TV with Yoko Ono saying, we discovered primal therapy. Feel your pain. Don't medicate it. Don't get away from it. John Lennon was my idol and savior, even though I hated my father and my grandfather. Here's a man who's nice. Oh my God, John Lennon. There are nice men out there. Plus, he writes great music. And when he said that, I said, I bought the Primal Scream. I went to a bookstore. I got to find this book. And everything that was in the book, I said, here's my whole life right in front of me. This is great. So I went. My sister relocated to LA, so I hitchhiked out to Los Angeles, believe it or not. And we met, and a girlfriend of hers gave me a sniff of mescaline while she was probably doing a drug deal. And she said, here, take a sniff of this. I'm going to go in. Maybe she had sex with the guy. I don't know. I was in the car, and I had stopped crying at about 11 or 12 years old from the beatings. I would laugh when they beat me, and I would say talk about primal sentence, right? You can't hurt me. You can never hurt me again. And I laughed at them and how stupid they were, thinking they could hurt my body. I was that angry, and I wanted to make them crazy for driving me crazy with whips. And we're talking breaking horse whips on my legs, going through 3 or 4 horse whips. And you know how many times you have to be beaten to make a horse whip wear out? times 3 or 4. This is after straps. My father had one rule: never hit the face. Now, maybe something violent happened in the family system where that was like the code of ethics. It's just kind of interesting. And so when I discover it, so here I'm laying in a car waiting for, after I took that little sniff, just a mescaline, it was psychedelic. I said, I'm in LA, what the heck? And I was a hippie teenager. And I was about 20 years old. I burst out crying. What did I say? I'm sorry, mommy, don't hurt me. I'm sorry. Still to this day, it touches me. And I didn't even realize I was saying it. Then I heard myself saying it, and the tears felt like I've been waiting a lifetime to let them out. Like finally I could feel some pain. And after that happened, I was just like, I said, this is the best feeling in the world. I want more of this. I want to let go. I want to open up. I want to cry more. I want to feel more. And that led me on my path. Actually, shortly after that, probably, I discovered a primal therapy group in New Hampshire. I was in Massachusetts, and there was a group in New
So
Hampshire.
that was like the beginning of your spiritual path.
That really was.
And so it was inspired by John Lennon specifically.
Yeah, and Arthur Janoff, who I met in LA. They did a book signing in LA right before he died. And I went up to Arthur Janoff, who was supposed to be an egomaniac, celebrity healer type. And I said, I wouldn't have had the life that I've had if I did not read your book when I was a suffering teenager. And I want to thank you for giving me a life I couldn't even imagine because of that one book and John Lennon saying it on national TV. And I have a picture of him and I too. I can dig that up. I have a digital picture of him and I.
I would love that, yeah.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I did find it, so I do have that. And he really started me on my emotional healing path. I went to a couple of concerts in LA before that happened, and who was the band? Was it Traffic? The band Traffic was Stevie Winwood. I don't know if ever Clapton was, no. And when the band started, I was so drunk when I was there, I threw up on the person in front of me. And I wandered home. I was drinking Jack Daniels because the Rolling Stones drank Jack Daniels and Jimi Hendrix and blah, blah. I was in that kind of hippie drug, LSD thing. And I said, I am going to be a severe alcoholic if I don't do something. And I wandered home and I said, I'm going to stop going to, I turned 21, drinking age. And I said, I'm going to not go to any bars for a week. And I'm going to see how many friends I have. I never heard from anyone. And everyone was my age, drinking where it's legal to drink. We can get drunk and feel whatever or have sex with whoever. And I said, these aren't my friends. These people aren't deep. I said, I want a deep experience. So then I started exploring, finding primal therapy in New England, and bingo, I found a 6-week intensive with support groups after that. And that started, and I did that for 8 years before they had some political. And then I did another 6 weeks intensive in Los Angeles, which is great. Going back to Los Angeles, first they were a hippie, and then probably 10 years later, going back as a therapy client. And I had a wonderful therapist. He was fairly homophobic, and he died a couple of years ago. But he was really great with me, and he wasn't so great with other clients. He was really nasty to other clients, but somehow either I had a guardian angel and we were like brothers, kind of like Bert and I. We had that mentor brother kind of support relationship. So I felt like he was the first man in my life who was nice to me, and guided me into going into the deep pain and the feelings and whatever to heal them and be powerful. That was the other thing. He was the first one who said, anyone who could withstand what you withstood is actually a champion, not a victim. So I want you to see yourself as Gary the champ, not Gary the victim. And no one had ever said that my entire life. I had no male support whatsoever. And it touches me to this day. And he bought a pair of boxing gloves for me. And the movie Rocky it won the Oscar that year. I think it was 78 or whatever, or 76, 78, whenever I was out there, right when Rocky was at the hit. So I would have to wear my boxing gloves in shorts and a tank top to all the sessions to show everyone that there was a champ in the room.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, no one ever celebrated me as being strong, good, or a fighter, because I never fought back. I was totally a passive victim while I was beat up on the floor. And if I cried from the pain of the beatings, he would beat me until I showed no emotion. So I joke with people, I had two choices in a lifetime, to be a saint or a serial killer, because this is how people shoot up schools. All that anger is implanted, and they say, I'll get everyone back for what happened to me. I'm going to shoot up those kids in school, and I chose to heal and become a master healer as opposed to a master perpetrator. Now, here's the bizarre thing. In hindsight, this will really teach your listeners, would I be here if my father was not a PTSD victim of my grandfather, of my great-grandfather, on one level, going to Omaha Beach in World War II, having Nazis shooting, killing his friends around him, running on the beach into bullets, and then going to Germany to defeat Hitler, then coming home, and the baby boomer generation was born. So if my father was not an A-list killer of Nazis, would I be here today? Now, the cosmic irony to that is, so because he had that strong perpetrator, alpha male, you could call it, that led to my existence. But interestingly, here's the bigger cycle here. That happening in Germany hardened his heart, made him ruthless and cruel, because life was cruel, war is cruel, right? Now, here's the irony. I'm his battered son, hating him. I'm sure he hated my grandfather. My grandfather hated my great-grandfather. I go back to Germany to Bert Hellinger to open my heart after it was closed by someone losing their heart in Germany. Look at that cycle. And on a global scale, I look at cycles, bigger cycles in life, separate from the multi-dimensions I tap into. So guess how many people died in World War II?
No idea.
75 to 85 million people.
Wow.
Guess how many baby boomers were born after World War II?
Is it the same number?
Same number. Isn't that interesting? So when you step away, philosophically, let's say, does great death create great life somewhere else? Does HIV and the AIDS epidemic take a lot of lives? But where does the birth come after that? Does COVID, I feel COVID's man-made, not anything natural. It's naturally that they created it to kill people like a bioweapon, but separate from that. So what happens from the great death of a disease, whether it's man-made or not? So what is the future outcome that we do not see from a negative experience on Earth? So one thing about, you could call a perpetrator victim, would life move forward if there wasn't a catalyst, deep stuff, but if there wasn't a negative catalyst? So if we didn't have a violent tornado, we just had the hurricane, we'll say tornado is more accurate. If we didn't have a violent tornado, liken it to weather, rather take the perpetrator victim energy out of it. So look at a tornado as a weather perpetrator swirling up the seeds in the rain, throwing them in a place, a desert, and all the rain and the seeds that came down when the tornado was done create a Garden of Eden where there might have been a desert. So you could say the tornado was the perpetrator attacking the feminine land, and then once it stopped being a perpetrator, a Garden of Eden grew in its place where the violence took place. Same thing with humanity, same thing with nature. So what I view is perpetrator, and you could call it perpetrator energy, is the opposing charge upon, and if we don't want to use the word perpetrator because people get triggered by that, do positive or negative energy. If you look at a battery on your car and you're jumping your car, there's one positive, one negative, the battery won't work with opposing forces. So if you look at whether we believe perpetrator energy or victim energy, they're opposing forces seemingly against each other. But here we see in family systems, they're connected. and they're generational, going round and round and round and round. Would the wheel of life move forward without the contrast or catalyst of negative pushing the positive?
Yeah, so I have a very personal experience
Yeah, please share.
where it's like, so when I was 19, I told you that's when my spiritual journey started. But up until then, I had been through quite a bit of chaos and like tumultuous stuff that led to, like in your case, seeking for my
Yeah,
understanding of who am I, why do I belong here? Because I actually
yeah.
tried to kill myself when I was 17 years old.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had cancer when I was 16, had my thyroid removed, and had near-death experience from both that sickness, but also from the suicide attempt. And so in my book that I wrote, A Journey into Truth, I
Mm-hmm.
share about the hardships, but then I also share about the journey from 19 onwards,
Yeah.
about meeting so many incredible people. And like, do you know who Abraham Hicks is?
Yes.
So that was one of my first teachers on this journey. And I feel that way that you feel about John Lennon. I actually
Yeah. Yeah.
her as well, where it's like, I would not be here if you weren't so bold to be so big and out in the public. Like I've heard she's gotten a lot of resistance from other people as well. And like she was one of the reasons, like I said, that I feel like I am here because she was bold and still
Yeah.
followed the path.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's also why I was so inspired to create my company and also to share with other people. It's like, and that's why it's a butterfly because I share. Sometimes we have to go through that hardship in order for
Exactly. It's the
um,
chrysalis. Yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
transformation. And I was just thinking about this the other day. It was like uh, without uncomfortability, because I'm kind of going through it again at this phase of my life. Without this uncomfortability, I wouldn't have had the uh, inspiration or the push to begin this podcast, to
Right.
begin doing
Exactly.
retreats. So it's like this stuff had to happen in order to push me to go.
Yeah.
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 So
And we could also call it like, does the negative motivate us? Rather than use the word perpetrator, which people can get triggered, is the negative charge a motivation to push us to the positive?
right, yeah, that's what I feel. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because and you see it all the time. Like when there is a disaster, people come together. Or if someone in the family is like dying or they get sick, then the whole family decides to come together and
And
resolve it.
drop some of the stuff until the grief sets in, then they go crazy again. I've seen so many families go crazy after the death and the grief, and people don't handle it well. But one of our survival skills as a species is able to handle grief, because you realize, you're the younger generation of your family. I'm now the older generation, but I was the younger generation. And I'm actually starting a new company around this, of videotaping people's stories to give a memory stick to future generations to hear what happened before they incarnated in the family, like the family story said from a senior family member. So for when they die, oh, here's what Gary said about my great grandmother, who I never met, that he knew. You know what I mean? So I didn't have any kids, so I'm going to do one for my great niece and great nephew, so they know some of the stories that happened before them. But we're all here because we could handle grief. I mean, to be alive, survival skill is how we handle grief and loss, because not 99% of people, outlive their parents. And how you handle the grief of losing a parent. I have many people who are in their 60s now dealing with their parents who are in their 90s. I said, boy, I'm glad I got it over when I was in my teenage years and 50. And it's only now I have compassion for my father and all the males who came before who suffered so greatly. And how we handle that. And I tell people, treasure every moment, as miserable it is to go through your father with Alzheimer or mother with Alzheimer. I said, treasure every minute, because once they're gone, it's forever. You will even treasure the bad stuff after they die, because that was your last point of contact before they left the earth, And the great thing about constellations, you can have a sneak peek into the heaven realm after they pass and get messages that are kind of different than when they were alive. I went to a psychic reading once. Now this is, I had just discovered Constellation. So a workshop space I was going to rent in Pasadena for Constellation. Oh, they're doing a psychic. Let me see how they set up the room, because I'm going to, in a month, I'm going to be there one Sunday a month. And he points at me. Now, we hadn't even started, right? We're all sitting in chairs. I have my little name badge on. He points to me. He said, your father's here, and he feels so bad how much he beat you. Of course, I started crying. Number one, I wasn't a paid client. The lecture didn't start. He pointed at me in the audience. I have your father here, and I'm sorry I beat you so much. How in the realm of possibility, 1 in 100 trillion, he would say that to me? And then the follow-up thing he said, and what your father's saying, at least it made you stronger. So it's just interesting, random stuff like that happening. And,
Psychic?
huh?
Do you know the name of this psychic?
I can't remember. It was quite a while ago, but I was in absolute shock, and I was sitting there with tears streaming down my face, and it wasn't even part. I mean, he just ran, and so my father must have came through very strong. You know what I mean? And he didn't know me from Adam, but how could he hit it on the head so accurately? And I really felt it was real, because out of everyone in the room, who would know that? No one I was with knew that. And I went by myself, so I didn't know anyone in the room. I was seeking, how it's set up for my future Constellation rental, Yeah, so there's a field of consciousness. And one thing I want your listeners to know, constellations are the right field for me. They're probably the right field for you to do it. But I want listeners to know that constellation is a key that unlocks the door. Now, you might be a psychotherapist and you want somebody on a leather couch to unlock your door on how to communicate or heal your clients. I'm not saying it's the only key. It's the key that worked best for me and thousands of clients. And I feel tremendous honor and pleasure for sharing my gifts in that way. But if you're a psychotherapist, a coach, or a counselor, and you tune in a different way, then that's the best way for you and your clients to receive it. Some clients think this is so woo-woo, they don't, but after an experience, I had one woman, she was doing a constellation in Santa Monica, and she said, you told everyone in the room, you Xeroxed my confidential 2-page questionnaire about my ancestral history, and you gave every person that in the room and had them study it to say the things they're saying. I said, no, I would never do that. That's a breach of confidentiality. I said, that was private between you and I. And I said, furthermore, how did I know you're going to pick Mary to be your rep? Mary's never been to a workshop. I don't know who Mary is. You chose her to be your rep. And she started speaking like your mother. She said, you didn't set this up like a theatrical play in a script. I said, no, she's tuned into the field of your maternal line as you. She was like flabbergasted. She thought it was a setup, like an
I
improv.
want to share with you what Sonia has told me. I told you when I was emailing you, Sonia told me a story.
Yeah.
So I'd like to share because I think this is very relevant. So, and hopefully you remember the story, because maybe you can add into what happened.
Sure.
But or maybe even how you felt about it.
Yeah.
But she shares, it was a workshop setting, so it was a group workshop.
Yeah.
And she told me it was actually hard to get up to the room. Like you had to go down a hallway. Like it wasn't an easy just walk right in kind of thing.
Right.
And she said one day you guys were in the middle of a constellation where it was someone who went missing in war.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden, someone who was off of the street, like someone who was homeless, just decided, he just ended up walking in at just the right time, walked into the room and just comes and sits down. And then everyone just continued on. He sat there and fell asleep, and then woke up when you guys finished and just left. And she said months later, she was in the workshop setting with you again. And then the same guy comes in, except this time he's not homeless. He's completely like, looks like a normal person. And he says, I just came to say thank you so much. I don't know what you did or what happened in this room, but whatever you did, it changed my life. And then that was it. So do you remember that story?
There's one very similar. I don't know if it's her interpretation. I can't remember if she was there or not. Well, I was working very similar. That's happened 2 or 3 times. So I'm trying to think which location that it was in, because it's happened at every workshop. And that's the thing I want the listeners to know about how big the multidimensional field is. So there's a thing called precognition, where how did the people who choose to be in the constellation room decide to do it on a particular night? So I didn't have a lot, I have more Asian clients in LA than Arizona. It's pretty white bread out here, very, not as ethnically multicultural as LA. And I had a Korean client working, and no one knew that. And all of a sudden, a gaggle of 4 Korean girls walked in the door. We've been hearing about you forever. We decided tonight's the night we're going to come. So my Korean client had 4 Korean girls to use as reps for her ancestry. But more in line with the one you were just sharing about, I was working with an African girl from Ghana, Africa, and we were doing the constellation in the middle of it. At the beginning of it, a guy came in inebriated and sat down. This might be the one. I think it was in Venice, California. And we did the constellation. And he said, "Oh, I don't know what you're doing." I think this is the same one. He said, "I don't know what you're doing here, and I'm sorry if I disturbed anything." I said, "No, that's fine," even though I knew he was drunk. And it was on Venice Boulevard. So a lot of people drink and wander around near the beach in California. And the client said that her uncle travels Africa, and maybe every other Christmas he will come back drunk to check in on the family system. And then he wanders off to other towns in Africa. Maybe he had a girlfriend in every port who, and she said, "That was my uncle. That was my mother's brother." Great. Okay. We come back a week later. He comes in the room sober. "I want to talk to the group." He said, "I don't know what you do here. I don't think it's for me, but I want to apologize to all of you if I disturbed you in any way last week when I was here." And I said, "Great, you're welcome to stay." He said, "No, I just want you to know that." So my theory is, how could someone that inebriated in an altered state with alcohol remember exactly what time the group was, not knowing what we did there? So my theory as a facilitator, here's an alcoholic. He might be an alcoholic because he represents someone excluded. Here's this guy with a group. There was a food table there next to registration for snacks, packaged snacks and whatever, water. How could he remember in his inebriated state to come back because it made it such a big impression? So my theory is he wasn't excluded from being drunk. We included him in the larger context of the evening. And I said, there's a reason he showed up, and I don't know what that reason is yet. And sure enough, at the end of the first constellation, we knew it was the missing uncle, and it's just, it's happened more and more. And I had another client whose dog died. I gave her body work in LA, and I loved her dog. I would play with her dog, a big German Shepherd named Cora. She was beautiful. I did her memorial service, and her pit bull bit me in the memorial service with the hand out. I went, almost took off my hand. Anyway, so she comes to work on the grief of her dog dying, and a guy comes in with a German Shepherd at registration. And I wasn't, dog friendly. He says, "Oh, what's this? I don't think it's for me. It just seemed like something I might be interested in." I said, "Well, come back anytime, take a car with you, whatever." Now, he didn't know the first client working had a dead German Shepherd. It's the only time a German Shepherd ever showed up. So she looked at me and she said, "That was a sign." I said, "You think? You think?" So then she picked my deceased partner to rep. He knew of her, but he didn't know what she was working on. He got down on his knees and said, "I'm not trying to make fun of this, but I'm not human. I'm a dog. And I see a rolling hill of grass, and I just want to run to my heart's content in a green grassy field." The client's crying. I'm crying still, even remembering it, 15 years later? It's so deeply
Yeah, I have a very similar story of the
Impacts your
last one I
heart.
facilitated, which was in
Uh-huh.
Alaska. I won't tell too many of the details, but she brought her dog with her.
Yeah.
The door was closed, so the dog was on the other side.
Yeah.
We did like 3 constellations, so it was a full day. This was towards the very end while she
Yeah.
was working, and all of a sudden, we were very close to the end, and someone opens the door. The dog comes running into her, the owner of the dog, and then the person next to her who's representing her I think her inner child, she goes, I have no, it was representing trust. It
Uh-huh.
was representing trust. And then this person who was representing trust, she goes, I have to leave, like I have to go pick up my children. And then at the same time, the woman picks up her dog and she's just holding it. And then the trust leaves the room. And all of a sudden, I get this awareness as I come back into my body. And I go, oh my gosh, your dog came in to replace trust because trust had to leave. And it was so beautiful because it was like the field saying, trust is always here and
Yeah.
right with you no matter what. And so I'm going to get emotional thinking of that too.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing is maybe she couldn't trust an adult in her family system, and a dog replaced that attachment to safety and trust.
Right. Yeah.
Because
No,
dogs
that's
are
what
very
it
much
was.
like
We
that.
were helping her to gain in to bring in more trust with
Yeah,
this person who was in front of her. And I think also the dog was a little bit easier for her to take in because it was someone she knew and loved and could hold
right,
closer. So
right.
it
Exactly.
was so perfect. So
Yeah,
and Sonia has told me as well where dogs will come in to represent and she's like, oh, it's perfect. But
yeah,
this also led me to another question because I notice when I'm facilitating, I receive information.
yeah,
I call it my guides, but
yeah.
you can call it whatever. I really don't think it has to have a name. But I want
Uh,
to know, do you also receive this and how do you receive information?
yeah, well, it's an insight. I often feel like it's a consciousness that just floats into me. Like some will be working a problem. It's almost like imagine a constellation, you're holding a group. It's like, say there's a chessboard on the floor, life-size chessboard. You're saying, well, if I move the pawn here, the king and queen are mother and father, I'm looking at that. So I'm looking at the chessboard in front of me, but then the other information about what's behind the chess pieces floats into my consciousness. And I say, oh no, this is really about that. You think it's about this game. This is what the real source is. So often I would say, great, that's all well and good. Great, points taken. You're right on track. Turn to the wall. There's something up in the corner there that wants to communicate to you. And I might give them the message that I'm getting from that invisible person, generally bigger than them in the corner or whatever, and relay the message that I'm getting. And I say, try saying this phrase to that being, invisible being that's in the corner of the room there. And 99.9%, it's always accurate. They'll either cry or they'll be like, oh my God, I didn't expect that my issue is about this. I was so distracted with the game on the floor, I couldn't see the bigger thought form that was kind of acting itself out through the chess game. And that's true of most of our family systems. We have the physical chess game right in front of us, but there's an unseen bigger element, which you could call the ancestral element or the psychic aspect of it. Or I wrote a book with Amika Swami, who's a quantum physicist, and he had never seen anything. In 10 minutes, I gave him his whole life story without knowing anything. And he said, what did you tap into? I said, I tapped into the quantum field that you get to through mechanics. I get to through multi-dimensional emotional spiritual connection. You gave me permission to go there, and I replayed your whole life for you in 10 minutes. He was there. He said, I have to rethink the universe. I've never seen it. I've never experienced anything so multidimensional as what you just showed me. And I said, well,
So
that's the
funny.
field I operate in. We wrote a book called Quantum Activation. I chose the title. So he wrote about the science side of it and what he sees about emotions and stuff. And then I wrote the constellation piece, and another guy, Carl David Blake, wrote more instructional side to it. So
Yeah, it's so funny you brought that up because right before you said that, I was going to ask you about like if you've had people who were skeptical because I can imagine some of the people who are watching this are kind of like, that sounds all very like not real kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I
Until
tell
you
them
actually
come. I say come
experience.
and experience it. I
Yeah.
had one guy who was chosen in Santa Monica. I remember it well, and I said, "Can you rep for this person?" Blah blah blah. He didn't know what the problem was. He said, "Okay, I'm very upset." The Constellation entity said, "So can I talk to the room? I'm very upset." I said, "Yeah. What's the problem?" He said, "I'm an atheist, and I just had a spiritual experience that I don't believe exists on Earth." I said, can you hold the duality of opposites? I believe there's nothing but the physical, and I just had an experience. I said, can you call yourself an atheist who had his first spiritual experience tonight? So you never want to negate the client's existing belief system, because don't forget, that came from his ancestry. Maybe there was tremendous grief. They didn't believe in God because someone died young. They didn't want to feel the grief, so they blamed the accident, the tractor that ran over their grandfather. Tractors are bad, and they don't see the spiritual side to it. You know what I mean?
I think this reminds me of something Bert Hellinger has said, where
Yeah,
it's your people who are looking for God are looking for their father,
yeah, or mother.
or mother.
Yeah, it can be father or mother. Because don't forget, if we want to get into the meta, not Facebook meta, but the meta dynamics of constellations, which I love teaching people, and it's in a lot of my books, is that our father represents the future and money, and the mother represents the past and our body. Because we gestate inside the mother, then we're birthed externally out of the mother, separate from the mother, ideally into the hands of the father. He says, here's life. Here's the whole world. I've given you the whole world by giving you a body with eyes and a nose and a mouth and, physical body. So if you really look, like I had a client on Sunday, she said, well, blah, blah, blah. I've done tons of work. I said, great, me too. And she said, but I can't make money and I don't know why, blah, 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 blah. I said, oh, how's your relationship with your father? I'm not speaking to him. I said, oh, really? Yeah, that's kind of interesting. And you're having money problems. So I told her this, exactly what I'm telling you. So we do the constellation. Sure enough, the father dynamic showed up. And I said, if you can't receive the gift of life the way your father gave it to you through your mother, then how can you receive money from clients? How can you nurture clients like a mother and receive money like a father and be happy with both? So, oh, I never thought of it that way. So we got her rep to say that, thank you for the gift of life you gave me. I take you, you're my father, and this was my experience with you. And I said, imagine, my first teacher, Heinz Stark, taught us this. He said, put the earthly father, I didn't even put it, I just told you, imagine, here's your earthly father, but there's the divine masculine, oops, which one am I turning, behind him. And I said, look to the divine masculine who wanted you to be born with this earthly man to learn some lessons. So I had her talk to the higher father, the divine masculine, who wasn't corrupted by earth, which of course most of our parents are, if not us ourselves. And I had her say, thank you for the gift. I wouldn't be here having the gift. And so I said, tell me about your father's economics. She said he could never make more than $40,000. And guess what she told me her limit was
40,000.
at the pre-interview? I said, oh, so have you ever heard of the word loyalty? So do you think you're stuck because you're loyal to your father in a symbolic way with money because you're rejecting him every other way? I said, what if you just appreciate the gift he did give you and didn't put a price tag on it and say, I'll make money that you could never make and honor you by being successful, Dad. Thank you for the gift I got so I can go in the world and be successful.
Yeah,
And
I've had a constellation for myself from Sonia,
yeah,
where it was about money and bringing in as well. And the way it was set up was it was me, no, it was money, and then my parents. And
yeah,
so he asked me, what do you see? And I said, my parents are blocking money. And he
uh-huh,
was like, okay, there it is.
yeah,
He
yeah,
said,
yeah,
what I see is the money, your parents lead to money. And so taking in life
Right.
from them will allow that to flow.
Exactly. Exactly. If we share anything with whoever's going to listen to this, it's like, can we accept life as a gift with the problems, the nightmares, the trauma? Can we see that it's all a gift because we are alive to learn it, to share it, and grow from it? And hopefully we can transfer. You're chosen by this, the field probably chose you like it chose me. Our thing as philosophers and speakers and facilitators is to guide other people into the abundance of the gift we did receive. We can cry till the day we die, shoulda, coulda, woulda, shoulda, coulda, woulda, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Will that serve us at our deaths? We'll say, oh, I have to come back again and do it right the next time. What if we can say it's all a gift, no matter what it looked like, and I'm going to take the positives of that gift, and I'm going to move it forward and do something good in life with it.
And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, taking it in. And this is usually like a meditation I'll do beforehand that Sonia taught me. It has something to do with imagining your parents behind you, so your father behind you on your right side, and your mother behind you on your left side. But then we go on to have them imagine like a sea full of ancestors.
Yeah.
And then have them turn towards and really take in how many yeses it took in order for me to be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we also say specific words where it's like, no matter how it was, no matter what happened, I say yes to life. And I take in all the good and then
exactly.
So
and
it's not about your specific parents, although it is, because you, but it's all of that stuff.
One bizarre way to honor them with that, which is great, is to say, whatever's not the gift, I leave with you. So like for me, example, Dad, I take the gift of life you gave me, and with all its suffering, and I found out, I met my first cousin. I hadn't seen him in years. He told me what his father said he went through with my father as being beaten up boys. I said, oh my God, I'm just the latest iteration. So here's a healthy boundary. I'm really strong about healthy boundaries. Dad, I take the gift of life that you gave me, and whatever isn't the gift, I leave with you. So rather than him projecting his violence on me, I say, no, I received the gift. I respect and honor you to carry the pain that made you act violent to me, or to turn it back to my grandfather, your father, or the great-grandfather, and leave it with them. So the ancestors will take the pain back, but you have to honor and respect them so that they'll be willing to carry the pain that you've been carrying for them. It creates an individuated boundary for you, that you can be part of the system but not carry their pain, which is too much for a child. Even at your age now, you're still a child. I'm still a child of my father and mother, even though they're both dead. And so if I honor and respect that their pain is their pain, my life is my life, I've created a healthy boundary between their whole childhood and the ancestors, still honoring them as why I'm here or how I got here. And then I get to move forward in the opposite direction to make lemonade out of lemons. And I leave the Beyonce reference, but I leave the lemons with the originators of the lemons, and I take the lemons and I take the juice and run forward and make a nice cool drink out of it. So we don't have to project the negatives into the future. We honor that we were forced to endure them in the past, and now I'm moving on to the future. Thank you, but the lemons belong to you. I'm going to make lemonade over what I was given, and thank you for that. And I'm going this way now. That way we've honored them, we've included them, we haven't rejected them, we're letting them carry the weight and pain of what happened in their life. I can't take back the pain of Omaha Beach or World War II from my father. I wasn't even a sperm, you know what I mean? So just to let them carry it. That was their life experience, pre and post World War II, and the Depression in my family. They were both born in the 1920s during the American Depression. And, that generation, I look at all the pictures, I haven't seen them in a while, but they age twice as fast in my parents' generation from World War II than we have.
That photo that you sent me what year is that?
Which one?
It's like a black and white photo of the family members and you when you were young.
I'm trying to think of which one it was.
I'll ask you later, and then I'll put it in.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, or show me the picture and I'll know exactly when it was. Was it me holding a guitar?
No, it's you guys all lined up. There's like a woman, and then I think you're like a small one off on the side somewhere. And it's like
Oh,
black and white, and it's like a little.
okay, I'll have to see. I'll have to see
Okay.
where yeah, which one it was. I can't remember. Yeah, yeah. And that's why I want to do this new video. I think, what do we call it? Film your story legacy, or filmyourstory.com, or we want to offer that to grandparents so that they can talk on camera, and we'll give them a disc, or probably a thumb drive's better, that they can leave on their epitaph. So it's a new business. We already had a video company, and I said, this is a great way with all these retirees around us
Yeah,
to,
it's beautiful. That's what I'm doing here with facilitators.
yeah,
I'm working with a retreat company, and I was telling her that's the purpose, because there's so many people. Like the last person I interviewed, she's been working for 15 years, and she's never put her experiences out there or the
right.
work that she's done. And I'm like, there's so many beautiful voices that I don't want to go not ever
Exactly.
documented ever.
Yeah, well, make sure I get a copy of it so I can.
You will see them all on YouTube. Yeah, I'll send you this one as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, I'll share it far and wide to, or add it to my. I'm gonna update my website so I can add to the website and make sure I have your
So
credentials too to promote you. And you're in the LA area? Is that
I
predominantly
am Laguna Beach area.
fabulous? My favorite place.
Yes, yeah.
Even though
That's
I live in Arizona, I wish California, COVID really turned me off of California being under lockdown for 16 months. I had to get out, and Governor Newsom, and I lived there 30 years from Boston. Half my life I lived there, and it was the best 30 years of my life, but became a nightmare what Gavin Newsom was doing, destroying. And sadly, I still feel like California is my home state, but Arizona's, it's more conservative, but it respects privacy and civil rights and the old-fashioned American values that we need right now in this country. And I love California, don't get me wrong. I just wish it wasn't so badly managed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't feel like I will be here forever either.
Yeah,
I think Oregon or Washington is where I would love to be, just because
yeah,
I love trees. So it's more about the nature and
yeah. Well, come to Arizona. We have lots of trees.
okay, yeah. No, I
Because
still would love
a
to
lot
be
of people I know have
here.
left
Well, I teach
because,
in many different states. Well, I'm kind of just beginning to go outwards. So
yeah.
I've been to Utah, Colorado. Alaska is one of my favorites just because that feels like home to me. Do you have any advice for facilitators who are
Yeah,
beginning or
participate in the constellation. You're not fixing anything. You are allowing consciousness to grow and expand in a new way that the family never had an opportunity or safe space to express the trauma. You're providing a safe space without judgment, without being locked into duality. And the paradox is, we're not locked into duality, but we have to call a perpetrator, an anal rapist, your grandfather, whoever it was, the truth. Yes, he was a perpetrator, sexual abuser, and he gave you life. Life doesn't care how you got here, what was done to you. It kept you alive to move you forward. So, how can we separate you in a healthy way, even though you might have come from a perpetrator family system and you're the victim, or you're the perpetrator and there's other victims, you know? And it's a very dicey thing because we live in a world of duality. But if Tallinger taught us one thing, go into the world of totality, the consciousness of totality, or the totality of consciousness, where there is no right, wrong, black, white. It's all a gray area. So a true facilitator will stay in the gray area without judgment and realizing that something came good of it and create a healthy boundary to separate from the person who created the trauma, but still accept them as their creator who gave them life, their body, and their future.
yeah, I definitely have come to that awareness of good or bad. It's
Yeah.
not always just always black or white. And I think a lot of people see things that way until maybe they start to dive under, ask more questions about,
Well, that's what's great about constellations. We go beneath the belief systems, we go beyond their consciousness into actually a sacred space where We don't attach to, we speak the values for sure, because it's important when someone had a bad reputation, say a client was working, oh, he was an asshole, blah, blah, blah. Well, I said, number one, you don't know what ever made him and then you find out that person was sexually abused. I said, so here you're blaming him, but that little boy didn't ask to be. You know, one of my key phrases I have memed somewhere is no one asks for what life gives them. That includes our birth. We didn't ask to be born. There was a bigger force guiding us. So can we be in a line with that bigger force? Even as a facilitator, you know, we were chosen to do this for whatever reason. Can we be in a line with a bigger force that's beyond duality to serve our clients and to open our hearts to the work? I met a lot of there was a guy online. He did a great job facilitating. He put the woman there. He wouldn't let her talk. You're the great grandmother, lost a baby, and we're emotionally unavailable to your daughter. Now the client here has a cold relationship to her mother because you wouldn't talk about the miscarriage and blah, blah, blah. He wouldn't let the rep say one thing. Everything he said was technically correct, but he was mentally ordering the constellation, which it was truthful stuff. He not once said, well, how do you feel as a grandmother who lost a baby? You know?
So do you have any closing things that you'd like to say to potential facilitators or just people who are just learning about this work?
I would say my name's Gary Stuart, 26-year facilitator. No, one of my biggest insights was no one asks for what life gives them. That includes your parents, grandparents, and everyone who came before, and you yourself. So we are in a place of power by being alive to create our own destiny in the way we want to. That's total freedom on every level. And you will have great success at it if you honor what came before and leave whatever's not the gift that you received to those who gave you less than pleasurable things. Don't forget, you survived it. If you can survive your family system, you can survive anything in life. And what I call, just to keep everything current with Constellation, is we all inherited AI, which is ancestral intelligence. They could survive Auschwitz, and you're here because they could survive Auschwitz and Nazism. You could survive slavery and enslavement, and you're here because your ancestors figured it out. Before computers, before any modern conveniences, we have all the wisdom and all the skills and talents that we would ever need to survive till the day we die, built into our DNA and our human soul.
I want to say thank you so much, Gary. You are such a big inspiration to me just for, like you just said, moving through what was given to you and taking the best from it, and then also giving that to others. Because the teacher, I don't know if she would have been the same person if she never met you or didn't learn from you. Sonia.
Oh, yeah. She was at many workshops before she died, decided to become a facilitator and train.
Yeah, and if she didn't take those choices, I wouldn't be here in this work.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you for your part, Gary.
I love passing it on to the next generation because I'm more in retirement legacy building right now, but I had a new idea to refurbish my image in the world today. So I'm going to be working on that to transform my website into something different. So I'm a philosopher at heart. And I think that's what Bert was. When you start to see these meta dynamics of life, love, death, grief, sadness, perpetrator, victim, you start to step away and become a philosopher, so to speak. And my age, having lived life a long time, been through everything from my teens to now in my 70s, you get to step back and see the bigger picture of life. We're still in life, but you see the bigger picture and the bigger dynamics that are at force, and you have more compassion. I feel like I'm Buddhist in nature, just accept everything, have an open heart to everything. And one thing I think the newer generation, I don't mean to be judgmental or superior in any way, open your heart to the client and their family system, no matter what they did. Remember, it is a trite saying, they did their best, but they actually did. And if they didn't do their best, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
So hold in your heart and soul, they did their best for whatever they had or didn't have, and you're here because they did their best. And they're actually our best teachers on how to survive and thrive, even if it was a nightmare. You survived the nightmare of your family, so you can survive anything that comes after that.
Thank you so much.
Namaste.
Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you.